A friend of mine was telling me about a product that he was researching called Ormus or Ormes. He'd been taking some, was having some good results from it. But there are a lot of crazy claims that people were making about it, saying that they thought it might make you live forever and all sorts of this other stuff that tells you that it's some hooey behind it. You know, made me, the red flags go up. You think of a used car salesman trying to sell you a piece of junk. And so I was a bit turned off and hesitant to even get involved with it, but he brought it over, and we put it in this jar, this bottle, and wrapped it in aluminum foil because it's supposed to be protected from EMF. And so I thought, well, there's 3 tests I know I could do right off the bat with it. One is a pendulum test, and in order to tell about how this works, I have basically turned my body into, and other people have done this too, turned my body into something similar to a crystal radio, because the body has ion fields that radiate out of the hands of a person who's fairly healthy electrically. Usually it's about 6 inches, radiates out of the hands and can detect ions in that field. And if the body wants the ions that are in that field, it will turn the synapse, when the synapse fire, because if you hold your hand out like this, you'll get random jerking of your hand. It's really noticeable if you hold like a laser pen against the wall. You'll see the random jerking. But if your body is in a field that it wants something or doesn't want something, it will actually turn that randomness into a clockwise or counterclockwise rotation. But if you hold out something like this, that clockwise or counterclockwise rotation will actually start the bobber, the pendulum, to start to rotate, because random movements will not cause it to turn. But if it starts to do any clockwise or counterclockwise formations, then it will start to move this. So basically what you do is you turn your body into a crystal radio. You use the water in your body as the crystal. You're using the ion fields, and you use your brain as a tuner. And this is very important because I have to keep my brain tuned to the ion fields. So I keep my brain locked into the ion fields. I do not ask the pendulum questions. A lot of people will do that. They'll set out a bunch of answers on a sheet of paper, and then they'll ask their pendulum questions, and it will start to swing in a direction toward one of those answers. But this is tapping into the subconscious, or this is, and sometimes actually tapping into the spirit world. And I don't do that. I keep my tuner locked in so that all I detect is the ion fields. So anyhow, the first test that I did with it to detect the ions of it, I just held this over it, and I got absolutely nothing. It's like, well, my body's not detecting any ion activity inside of this. So that was a dud. The next thing that I did is, if you've seen my crazy orgonite discovery videos, you'll see that there are fields that come off of cement cones, and actually almost anything that has carbon in it. And I'm able to track those fields. So I thought, well, let's see if the fields avoid this product. So I gave them a cognitive command, and the fields went right to this. So it's like, well, the pendulum doesn't detect anything. The fields are not avoiding it. So I thought, well, the next thing we're going to have to do is just try taking it. And I just set it aside. I had a lot of other things to do. 4 hours later, I went back to it again. And I just thought, well, let's just double check this. And I held the pendulum over it, and it started going clockwise. I thought, what in the world? 4 hours ago, there was nothing here. And now it was going clockwise. And to do the pendulum test, the way this is normally used, we use it for monitoring people's mineral balances. Because if your body is high or low in something, it will give you, like the iron, for example. If it goes clockwise like that, it means your body wants it. If it goes counterclockwise, then your body doesn't want it. Now, some people, the favorable and unfavorable directions are actually reversed. But mine is clockwise if you want it and counterclockwise if you don't. But then what a person does is, with my left hand, I can place a finger or my hand on this, like, for example, this copper, So like if I'm testing this for copper, I can place my hand on here, and this the ions will detect an increase of copper in my body, so it will then say that if it was neutral before, it will then say that it does not want something by the increase of copper. That way I know that there is copper in the product. So anyhow, by doing this test, I discovered that this thing was reading magnesium and zinc. And I thought, well, this is interesting. 4 hours before there was nothing. Now it's reading magnesium and zinc. Where in the world did it get magnesium and zinc from? And I was thinking back, and about an hour earlier, I was talking to my wife here in the kitchen, and I told her that my body tends to be low in magnesium and zinc. And somehow, by me saying that, it was now reading magnesium and zinc. I thought, this is really interesting. So then I went and I started doing the test with the minerals, and whatever mineral I spoke, this would start reading that it had ions of those minerals in it. And I could double check it with the stick, the ion stick. And this really got me curious. So then I thought, well, instead of speaking it, let me just think it, give it a cognitive command. So I gave it a cognitive command, and it did not affect it at all. And then I wrote out a mineral on a piece of paper and set it next to it to see if it would change, and it did not change it at all. Then I went and recorded my voice saying a mineral and played that to it, and that did not change it. And I thought, okay, either this is changing or somehow it's affecting my subconscious. So to make the next test, I told my wife, I said, I'm going to leave the room. You speak a mineral to it. Now, I had tested her before. She could speak a mineral and it would change it. So I said, I'm going to leave the room. You speak it when I'm not in the room, and then I will test to see if I can detect the change. So I left the room. She spoke a mineral to it. I could not detect the change. I did this twice, and it could not detect the change. So it was not actually occurring in the actual material itself that is in the bottle. So I thought, well, maybe it's occurring subconsciously because I have to hear it. But the thing that's confusing is, if it is subconscious in my mind, then I should be able to affect it by consciously giving it the cue. But it would not affect it if I gave it a cue or a command to change or spoke a mineral in my mind. It would not change. I had to speak it with my mouth and hear it with my ears, and then it would change. So that was really fascinating. And then we went and started taking the product, so that effect that this has was now in my body. So what I discovered is, instead of needing to use a mineral stick to check something, I can actually check something by declaring the mineral. I can just speak it. I can speak iron. And by declaring iron, my body starts putting out the ion signature of iron, and it says it doesn't want iron. Though if I declare manganese, which goes in balance with iron, then it wants iron, and it does not want manganese. So now I do not need to have the stick. I can actually declare it. And this, I mean, it's like, I do not understand that. And if we have to do a test, and I've been mentioning or speaking about minerals, I have to just say clear. And I rub my hand up and down in front of myself just to make a mental note that I'm clearing this out. But like yesterday, my wife asked me how I was doing on iodine. And she said, iodine's really good. You need to check it. Make sure you're taking it. So, of course, she mentioned iodine, and I went and tested it, and it was negative. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I remembered that I have the Ormus inside of me. So then it was like, okay, clear, because she'd been talking about iodine. I'd been speaking about iodine. Of course, it's going to read that it doesn't want iodine. So I cleared it, and after I cleared it, let me see if I can force it here. Then it said that it wanted it. So I went and took some. But so this is quite a mystery. That Ormus, by speaking it and hearing it, will change the ion effect of it. The other thing that was fascinating, because people talk about Ormus, particularly about the monatomic gold that is in it. So I thought, well, let's try this with metals. So I started speaking metals to it, and the same effect was occurring. To all the metals that I could think of to mention to it, the same thing was occurring. If I spoke the metal, my body would put out the signature of that metal, except for gold. It would not do it with gold, and perhaps it has some relationship to the fact that there is monatomic gold in Ormus. I do not know. This is a mystery, but I'm just going to pass it on, and thanks for watching.